For today, we're gonna talk about how emotions are formed.
Okay. Chemicals, I assume.
Not in biological way.
Okay.
So, I don't even know if it's a popular theory or famous theory, but in the book it says it's the combination of three things.
Okay.
The first one, interpretation.
Like perception.
Yeah, perception, like how you perceive the thing
Yeah.
in front of you.
Okay.
Second one, identification. So emotion is there. Let's say you feel sad, but you don't pay attention to it for so long.
Okay.
Then you wouldn't be too much in that negative emotions.
Oh, I don't believe that. Just because you don't identify it doesn't mean that you don't experience it.
From the book, I'll say a random thought arises. You identify with that thought. This identification creates an emotional reaction. As you keep identifying with that thought, the related emotion grows stronger until it becomes a core emotion.
Ah, okay. So identifying with the scenario, not specifically the emotion.
And the third one, repetition, is having the same thoughts over and over. So those three things can make strong emotion in your life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This is the Ellie
And Lee,
Show.
Like how you perceive the situation and whether or not you pull back previous situations or thoughts that you had when you had that feeling, and then how often those occur. So I think like with the identification, that can kind of be something that can create a really negative perception.
Oh yeah.
So I think it can,
From identification.
yeah, I think
Not from interpretation.
I think the identification kind of feeds the interpretation.
Oh yeah.
Because what could happen is, like, the way you perceive something could be based on what you've previously encountered.
Oh yeah. So do you think it's fair enough?
Yeah, I'm not a medical scientist or a psychologist, so I don't know if it's 100% true, but it seems logical.
Yeah, it seems logical because as I had strong negative emotions for like several years, I realized that my interpretation towards word was really wrong, I would say. Like it wasn't really the best one that I can use. So from here, interpretation is actually closely related to the belief or general assumptions you hold about life.
That's interesting.
So let's say you believe a statement such as, I should be healthy, I must get married, problems should be avoided.
Okay. So then if someone asks you a question like, oh, do you have a boyfriend at the moment? Or like, then you might perceive it as negative because maybe you're at the age where you're not married and it's like, how can they be asking this of me, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A question like that might be offensive to people who believe this.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think those with anxiety would kind of have a more negative perception of it. Because it could be like, this is the case where like a random stranger could ask a simple question that they don't perceive as, intrusive or
bad.
anything like that. But then that person has a really negative reaction to it. Like, oh my gosh, how could you say that? How could you ask that kind of question?
Yeah,
Where like
that's true.
the person asking it was just doing it from an innocent point of view. But then, yeah, I think those that are better at understanding the context, like where the question's coming from, then maybe they won't get as affected by it.
Yeah, so let me give an example from my life.
Yeah, sure.
So when I was an exchange student, one roommate asked me if we use plastic bag in Korea.
Okay.
And at first I was offended by that question.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of related to my belief that, Korea is not really interesting country or whatever
Okay.
compared to other countries. So it's kind of
So
my
then what?
weird belief, I would
But
say.
how does the question of plastic bags have anything to do with whether or not Korea is interesting?
It feels like they were kind of looking down on me.
Yeah, I can understand that we have very different perceptions.
So I had really, really tiring life because of my wrong perception, wrong interpretation, and wrong assumptions in my life.
But I think that
Yeah.
kind of goes along with the personality trait of neuroticism that you have, because your perception towards negative things are kind of higher. So something that might not seem negative to other people would seem negative to you. Because in that scenario, like, I would most likely forget that sort of thing because I would have just answered it very simply, like yes or no.
I answered it.
But it stuck with you.
Like,
That's the
at
difference.
the end, yeah. But at the end, I figured out it was just pure curiosity, because I talked about it later. Like, oh, I was kind of uncomfortable to get question like that, and I
Why?
felt like, why are you asking this? And she was like, oh no, I was curious because nowadays we're all caring about the environment. That's why, like, she asked if Korea uses paper bag or plastic bag. So that's like the intention of her asking that. And after that, I was like, oh, okay, so that's fair enough. And when I talked about it to my Korean friends,
Yeah.
they all say, like, that's really weird question. Like, why did she ask that?
Yeah, maybe she's an environmentalist.
Never mind.
If you're enjoying this video so far,
Please like and subscribe. There are so many wrong assumptions that I believed before, which can make my life miserable, and which did make my life miserable. But it's good that now I want to change, and I have been changed, so I'm fine these days. So I felt like those people who are not getting into the good university are all failure. That's my strong belief when I was like in high school.
you should tell that to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates.
They all came from Harvard, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but they didn't finish
But like,
university.
that was my belief. Doesn't matter. They anyway get into.
Such
so
failures.
It was kind of like my Korean weird belief, and it's kind of like how society thinks in Korea. So I think since I failed to enter a good university, it made my life so miserable. But yeah, I found out that thinking in this way isn't justification, because I used to think that, oh, okay, so people who are not going to good university are not failure because there are lots of values in life.
Yeah.
And I felt like, oh, okay, so I'm doing self-justification. But now I believe that it's not really self-justification, but it's just the belief that I really believe.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of emphasis on education in Korea. So it leads to that sort of mindset that I think even when you're looking for a job, I know a lot of employers will first look at the university that you came from.
Yeah, and even like, so when we first meet, different from Western culture,
Yeah.
we ask about the age because it's important.
Yeah, culturally.
Some people ask the university, and if they have never heard of them, like heard of that university, they're like, oh, okay. So it's kind of like what made me feel so sad before.
I have a good answer for that, though.
Okay.
You should
What is
tell
it?
them that you come from the school of hard knocks.
What's hard knocks?
It's a English phrase. Hard knocks meaning like life experience, straightforward life experience. Yeah, hard knocks is like, you know, if something bad happens to you, then you get up and you try again, sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So like people would say like those that have had those kinds of life experiences tend to be more resilient.
I am resilient for sure. My failure was kind of small, but still.
Couldn't you just give a lot of evidence of your lack of resiliency? Being affected by a question asking about plastic bags.
I need to cut this episode. I'm not going to post this because
cut.
I seem so weird.
No, it's fine. It's your experience.
Just presenting myself to the world that these people, this kind of person also exists in this world.
Yeah, I think
Anyway.
that's why it's interesting for us to have a conversation, because we're kind of on the opposite end. Because I usually just answer questions without thinking of any kind of deeper meaning.
Belief.
Yeah. So like if I thought the question is weird, I'd still first like immediately answer it, and then I'd say why.
I don't necessarily want to blame my mother. But like, I kind of was the same like you when I was in middle school. But I started to put meaning after, like, when my mother told me that my interpretation was wrong. So let's say, like, I told the daily experience to my mom, and talk about like the funny story in the school.
Yeah.
And my mom used to go like, no, that's like, you should get angry at that.
Oh,
They're
okay.
neglecting you. But it's kind of like not good joking, but like bad joke between students.
What was the second one?
Second one was identification.
Yeah, so I think in that situation, she was creating identification. And identification. She was changing your identification of how you should
Yeah, I
have
think
seen
so.
the situation.
And also, she kind of made me believe the wrong assumptions.
Yeah.
That if they are like, sometimes you just offend someone for fun, right? And I used to do that when I
I
was
did
young.
that a lot with friends.
Yeah, but
with
I
friends.
don't necessarily like that. But when I was young, I remember I used to do that, and if someone does the same to me, I wasn't really offended by it because it was just funny.
Yeah, it was done as a joke.
Or fun.
Yeah.
But after my mom was like, no, that's not funny, that's not fun. And I felt like, oh, okay, so this thing is something I shouldn't do, or like no other people should do it to me. And I don't really necessarily blame my mom, but I cannot think of the reason why I changed like this.
Because you usually follow what your parents do when you're younger.
That's true. But
Because when you,
I love my
that's
mom.
good to know. But I'm saying when you're younger, you perceive your parents as having like the highest authority.
It felt like I was super mama girl.
Yeah, I think so.
Yay! So, yeah, thanks to you, I kind of gained the skills of standing
up for yourself.
Yeah, let's get into the second part, which is identification. And yeah, now you have the belief and you have that interpretation according to your daily life, maybe small events. Now you analyze it with your interpretation.
Like in the sense you can interpret something small as being way more negative than it realistically is.
That's identification. And if it happens again and again, which is repetition, then now it can be strong emotion.
Well, I think that's why you see that a lot of in the current time of social media, you have the concept of these social bubbles. And then that's where people that are most likely like-minded, they feed into the same thing that you maybe have an issue with. So like, let's say there's something negative going on, and then they keep on affirming that the same thing is negative, and then whenever you see any case of it, or whenever they see any cases of it, then they keep on affirming it. So like an affirmation bias. So they keep on saying, yeah, this is why things are bad. It's because of this. And then it keeps on building. That's where you get the repetition. And then I think all three of them kind of feed into each other, because if you have the repetition, it kind of changes your identification. It's okay, yeah, let's say you're a little bit overweight and you're so used to people making a negative comment about your weight, then because you've repeated that so many times, the moment someone comments anything to do with your physical appearance, you take it negatively regardless of what they say. So now it's changed your identification, and in turn it's changed your perception, because it's just like learning something new. The more you repeat it, the more you remember it, and the more it becomes natural to you. So the same thing with those emotions. If you keep on repeating the same emotions, or if you're in an environment where that emotion is constantly occurring, or the thing that creates that emotion from you is constantly occurring, then it could make it like so much worse for you. That's why it's often good to always try and identify if you're in a bubble, in whatever the case may be, whether it's like you're a fan group of something, or maybe something in the news, and try and break away from that when you can.
Yeah, I cannot agree anymore.
To what?
Okay, you're smart.
So now we know how it's formed. What's your idea of how it can be adjusted, how it can be controlled?
That's gonna be next chapter.
Okay.
We didn't read it all.
So look at...
I'll just tell it from my
perspective.
And also you guys can check our next video.
Yeah. Please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps us out.
Thanks for watching. See you.